Hello and welcome to the Nguyen Son's series of informational videos on the changes to the Selective High School Placement Test. My name is Justin and I am a teacher at one of our many campuses. In this video, I will cover information on the mathematical reasoning section of the selective test. In this presentation, I will explain what changes have been made to the test format, what we will do to help our students, and what are the best tips and tricks in order to prepare for this change. As some of you may be aware, the manner in which mathematics is tested in the selective exam has changed. From 2021, selective mathematics will transition from the traditional mathematics to the more modern mathematical reasoning. Whilst the tested mathematical concepts and skills required to solve each question will remain uniform, the newer test will have a heavier focus on the analysis of each problem rather than the application of pure mathematics. This means that prior to applying a formula or a rule to solve a question, students will be required to dissect, analyze, and then interpret questions. These changes align with those made in other sections and indicate a strong shift towards logical reasoning, data processing, and question analysis. Many of you may be wondering why these changes were implemented. Well, in 2018, the New South Wales Department of Education commissioned a review of the selective exams to identify the key issues in these exams. From this research, they managed to narrow it down into 3 key issues, which can further be broken down into 13 action points. The first key reason is to ensure that entry to selective schools is based on ability, not background. This point aims to alleviate the discrepancies that may arise from being a part of a certain demographic. The second point is to optimize the assessment process to accurately identify the student's ability. This one aims to reduce the predictability and thus coachability of such exams to ensure the testing parameters are fair and just. The last point acts as a miscellaneous point and serves to address the gaps in the complex selection system. The main point which applies to the changes in the examination is the middle one. As a result of this, the New South Wales Department of Education has decided to make adjustments to the testing structure of mathematical reasoning. The old structure consisted of a combination of direct application and problem-solving questions. It took place in 40 minutes and consisted of 40 multiple-choice questions with 4 answer options each. The newer structure has a more substantial focus on problem-solving skills as well as analysis of each question. It remains at 40 minutes, but will only consist of 35 multiple-choice questions, this time with 5 answer options each. Whilst the new structure may seem more favorable to students given the reduction in questions, the complexity of such questions and the increase in answer options actually makes it more difficult. By comparing the two exams, this transition indicates several things. 1. The test is straying away from simple application of formulas and therefore minimizes rote learning. This means that students will now need to actively strive to understand mathematical principles rather than learn how and when to use them. 2. Examinations are designed so that not all students will finish. Similar to some university exams such as the Medicine Entrance Exam, UCAT and GAMSAT, these exams are not designed so that all students will necessarily finish and will only be finished by those who work fast and efficiently. 3. The last point is that students who are more naturally gifted or inclined towards English will benefit more greatly from the change. On this slide is a list of commonly tested topics. Prior to beginning the examination, students should have a sound understanding of the following topics. Given the competitive nature of the selective examination, the entrance exam often tests topics that students may not have necessarily learned in school. The topics taught at school include fractions and decimals, percentages, measurement, geometry, probability, ratio, and rates. The topics that may not have been taught at school include time calculation, averages, equations, data analysis, spatial awareness, and pattern recognition. I will now demonstrate what I mean by moving on to sample questions. As stated previously in my presentation, the format of the questions have changed. For example, let's look at a question with the old format. The question reads, add 1 hour and 15 minutes to 6:50 p.m. Let's see how this mathematics question would translate into a mathematical reasoning question. The new formatted question says, Sandy's watch reads 18:50. What is the time 1¼ hours later in 12-hour format? Here you can see that whilst both questions are asking students to use the same mathematical principle of time calculation, the manner in which you analyze the question is very different. In the old format, you were simply instructed on how to solve the question. Here, the student was required to add time, and following the teaching principles used at Nguyen and Sons, whenever you want to add time, the rule is you add your hours first, then your minutes. Solving this question, students should have gotten the answer 8:05 p.m. Moving on to the newer format, however, you can see that we are given a lot more information. Sandy's watch reads 18:50. What is the time 1¼ hours later in 12-hour format? Whilst we know that we will end up with the same answer, there are a few components that we had to analyze first. Step 1. We had to recognize that the question is asking for 12-hour time, so we first must convert 18:50 into 6:50 p.m. Step number 2. The question uses words to represent the amount of hours passed, so we must convert that into usable data. Therefore, we interpret 1¼ hours as 1 hour and 15 minutes. Step 3. We must identify that the word later requires you to add, and then once you do that, you can finally start solving by adding. Again, whilst the techniques are the same, the analysis which must go beforehand is far more extensive. Jennifer earns $160 per week working at a part-time job after tax. If she pays 20% of what she earned for tax, what is the amount of Jennifer's pay before tax? While some students may read this and get overwhelmed, here at Nguyen Sons, we want our students to break this question down and use a systematic approach when dealing with it. The first step is to 1. Sift through the information that is not useful. Often in mathematical reasoning questions, they will provide superfluous information that is not necessary to solving the question. It is then up to the student to sift through this information and remove them. In this question, the unhelpful pieces of information include Jennifer, working at a part-time job, and amount before tax. The second step is to then do the converse. Identify which components are useful and will be required to solve this question. In this case, it would be $160 a week, 20% of what she earned as tax. What is the amount of Jennifer's pay? Once these two steps have been completed, it is time to solve and answer the question. However, again, we are not answering the question blindly. We will continue to use our steps and techniques to further analyze our questions. For those who are unaware with our methods, to solve this question we use something called the unitary method. This method can be used when you have two quantities. In this case, it is the percentage and the amount of money, and these two quantities change with each other. For example, if one goes up, the other goes up. Since we meet these two criteria, we can use the unitary method. Whilst I will not bore you with the mechanics of the unitary method, it is this level of analysis and deconstruction that is required for our students to build this holistic understanding of mathematics and thus build on their mathematical reasoning skills. Moving on to our second question. This one reads, Jonathan read the following question in an examination. 2% of an hour is longer than 30% of a minute. Is this statement true? Again, similar to the previous question, students at Nguyen Sons will be taught to 1. Sift through the information that is not useful. 2. Identify the components which are useful. And once they have done these two, 3. Solve and answer the question based on a deliberately curated list of steps and rules, which advocate holistic learning. Now I will be moving on to tips and tricks. These will help increase your chances in performing well for the mathematical reasoning section. First and foremost, students should be completing practice past papers. Past papers are readily available from the NESA website, in our selective trial course, our mock trial examinations, as well as our practice examination books. The examination book I often recommend to parents is the Mastering Mathematics Selective and Scholarship Test series, as the style of questions in these books mimic the mathematical reasoning questions well. As repetitive as it may sound, number 2, students must engage in wide reading. This will improve their comprehension skills, help with time management, aid their analytical and judgment skills, and so much more. Reading widely has been proven time and time again to have a plethora of beneficial outcomes on students, and this is well founded in research. Number 3, improving time management. Whilst the examinations themselves might not be extremely difficult, the sheer lack of time may prove a challenge to many students. This is why it is ideal to begin priming students early and develop their time management skills as soon as possible. This can be done by timing students for everything, even simple tasks like washing the dishes and completing homework. This allows students to acclimatize themselves to working under stressful conditions and thus aids them to become more accustomed to working with a time limit. Number 4. This is the recommendation where I feel like we can help our students the most. It is to apply a systematic approach to dealing with questions. As I have stated prior, the mathematical principles behind these questions have not changed. The difference here is that between these questions and the questions that were in the exam prior is the manner in which you approach them. Here at Nguyen Sons, we pride ourselves on being able to help students approach things systematically, breaking questions down to its components, and having a real understanding of how to teach each problem. Remember that the changes to the selective examination are not minor, and require a shift in the framework we use to approach questions. This is a major step for education, and thus it is okay to be apprehensive. At Nguyen Sons, we aim to make this process easier and help parents and students alike through this difficult change. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to helping more students reach their full potential.